The first thing you notice is the silence. Not complete silence, the kind that exists underneath thousands of people pretending everything is normal. Silverware clinking against plates, soft piano music floating through expensive hallways, distant laughter echoing through polished wooden corridors, champagne glasses touching gently beneath chandeliers designed to make human beings feel eternal. And somewhere beneath all of it, a vibration, small enough to ignore, small enough for people to continue drinking, continue flirting, continue discussing weather, money, politics, future plans, because human beings are strange like that. We can feel something is wrong long before we admit it, but admitting it would destroy the illusion. So we delay, we smile, we keep eating. And if you were trapped on the Titanic, that would be the first psychological horror, not the sinking, the denial. Because at first, nothing looks like death. That's what makes it terrifying. The carpets still look expensive. The lights are still glowing warm against the walls. The ocean outside still looks calm enough to trust. You'd probably still be holding something ordinary in your hand. A glass, a coat, a cigarette. And somewhere deep inside your nervous system, a quiet sentence would begin forming. Something feels wrong. But even then, you wouldn't panic immediately. Most people imagine disaster as instant chaos. But real catastrophe rarely begins that way. Real catastrophe begins with confusion, with people asking questions too calmly, with staff members speaking in controlled voices, with passengers laughing nervously because the alternative feels too large to process. And psychologically, that's important, because the human brain was not built to absorb massive reality shifts instantly. It protects itself. It softens the truth. It buys time. So even as the ship starts dying beneath you, your mind continues trying to preserve normality. You'd still think about tomorrow. You'd still assume survival is automatic. Because modern people unconsciously believe the world is designed to protect them. And the Titanic shattered that belief in real time. At first, you'd probably go outside simply to look. Just curiosity. That's how human beings approach the beginning of almost every disaster. Not with terror, with observation. You step onto the deck. Cold air touches your face. The Atlantic at night feels impossibly large. Black water stretching endlessly in every direction. No city lights. No sound except distant wind and machinery humming somewhere deep inside the ship's body. And then you notice something strange. The crew moving faster than usual. Not running. That would cause panic. But moving with controlled urgency. You notice lifeboats being uncovered. Passengers standing around in coats over pajamas. People asking questions and receiving answers that technically sound reassuring, but emotionally aren't. It's just precaution. We're assessing the situation. Please remain calm. And this is where fear begins becoming psychological instead of physical. Because uncertainty is often more terrifying than confirmation. The brain hates incomplete danger. It wants clarity. Even terrible clarity feels safer than ambiguity. But on the Titanic, clarity arrived slowly, painfully slowly. And during that slow realization, something inside people began changing. Because there's a specific kind of fear that only appears when civilization suddenly stops feeling reliable. You spend your entire life believing systems work, that somebody is in control, that technology means safety, that wealth means protection, that massive things cannot fail. And then one iceberg tears through all of it. Not just metal, belief. The strange part is, you probably wouldn't think about death immediately. You'd think about logistics. Where should you stand? Should you go back for your belongings? Are they exaggerating? Should you wake someone up? People always imagine themselves becoming heroic during emergencies. But most humans become procedural first. You start organizing tiny actions because tiny actions create emotional stability. You button your coat carefully. You check your pockets. You hold on to meaningless objects because the mind desperately wants routine. And meanwhile, the ship is already dying beneath your feet. That's what makes the Titanic psychologically horrifying. The disaster unfolded slowly enough for people to emotionally experience it, slow enough for denial, slow enough for bargaining, slow enough for regret. At some point, you'd begin noticing the cold. Not ordinary cold, ocean cold, ancient cold, a kind of cold that feels emotionally hostile. The wind starts cutting through fabric, your hands stiffen, breath becomes visible, and suddenly the luxury disappears. The orchestra, the grand staircase, the fine dining, the social hierarchy, all of it starts collapsing under one brutal biological truth. Human beings are fragile, very fragile. It doesn't matter how rich someone is once the temperature drops low enough. It doesn't matter how educated they are once survival becomes physical. And maybe that's one of the darkest things the Titanic revealed. Most of civilization is performance, thin performance. Remove comfort, and people meet themselves very quickly. You start noticing faces differently. The businessman who sounded confident at dinner now looks pale and lost. The elegant woman fixing her gloves too carefully because keeping her hands busy stops her from shaking. The fathers pretending calm for their children while secretly scanning lifeboats with terrified eyes. The crew members speaking gently because panic spreads faster than water. And somewhere during all this, you begin realizing something unbearable. Not everyone is getting out. That realization wouldn't hit all at once. It would creep into you gradually, like cold water entering a room, first through logic, then through emotion. You count the boats. You notice overcrowding. You hear fragments of conversation. And eventually, your mind arrives at the sentence it has been avoiding. Some people here are already dead. They just don't know it yet. And psychologically, that changes everything. Because once death becomes mathematically possible, every human interaction transforms. Suddenly, people stop behaving like future-oriented creatures. The future disappears. And without the future, identity begins dissolving. That's the strange thing about human beings. Most personality is constructed around tomorrow, your ambitions, your routines, your plans, your grudges, your insecurities. Even your ego depends heavily on the assumption that more time exists. But remove tomorrow, and people become emotionally naked. You'd probably think about absurd things, not grand philosophical revelations immediately. Small things, painfully small things. A conversation you never finished. Someone you didn't call enough. The last normal morning before the trip. The way sunlight looked through your bedroom window weeks earlier. Human beings don't become cinematic when facing death. They become intimate. Memory narrows. Life shrinks into oddly specific fragments. And somewhere nearby, the orchestra keeps playing, which is almost too symbolic to feel real. Music continuing while the world collapses. Human beings trying to preserve dignity against inevitability. And maybe that's what the Titanic really was. Not just a shipwreck. A psychological portrait of humanity refusing to emotionally surrender, even while sinking. Then something changes. The angle of the ship becomes undeniable. Objects begin sliding slightly. People stop pretending. And panic finally enters the body fully. Not movie panic, real panic, confused panic, ugly panic. The kind where breathing changes first. The kind where the nervous system floods so hard your thoughts become fragmented. You stop thinking in paragraphs, only impulses. Move, find space, stay alive. And this is where social masks truly collapse. Because fear exposes hierarchy inside human psychology. Some people freeze completely. Some become aggressive. Some become strangely calm. Some help others because purpose protects them from terror. Others become selfish because survival strips morality down to instinct. And you wouldn't fully know who you are until that moment. That's uncomfortable, because most people like imagining themselves as good. But survival reveals truths normal life keeps hidden. The Titanic forced thousands of people into direct confrontation with themselves, not their public selves, their raw selves. And maybe the cruelest part is how slowly the ship died. Enough time to think, enough time to watch, enough time to emotionally process the impossible while still trapped inside it. You would hear sounds you'd never forget. Metal groaning deep beneath the floors, distant screaming carried by wind, lifeboats lowering unevenly into darkness, the ocean moving against the ship like something alive. And over time, another terrifying realization emerges. The world keeps going. The stars above the Atlantic remain beautiful. The ocean remains indifferent. Nature does not emotionally react to human tragedy. That realization breaks something inside people, because humans secretly believe suffering should pause reality. But it doesn't. The universe stays silent, completely silent. And standing there in freezing darkness, you'd feel unbelievably small. Not metaphorically, physically small, emotionally small, historically small. Just another temporary human body standing on metal in the middle of endless black water. The truth is, the Titanic becomes horrifying because it destroys the illusion of permanence. Not just the ship's permanence, your own. Modern people spend most of life distracted from mortality. Notifications, work, entertainment, conversations, schedules, noise, constant noise. The Titanic removed the noise, and underneath it, people met the oldest human fear, the understanding that life can end while you are still psychologically unprepared to lose it. That's why the sinking lingers in human imagination over a century later, because deep down, everyone recognizes the metaphor. You spend your whole life inside systems you assume are stable. Your career, your relationships, your body, your routines, your identity. Then one night something hits the side of your life quietly, and suddenly everything starts tilting. At first you minimize it. Then you negotiate with reality. Then you realize there aren't enough lifeboats for the version of yourself you used to be. And this is where the Titanic stops being history. It becomes psychological truth. Eventually, the lights go out. And maybe that's the moment that truly destroys people emotionally, because darkness changes fear. As long as the lights existed, civilization still existed. Rules still existed. Order still existed. But once the ship goes dark, human beings become animals standing in the void. The cold intensifies. Screams become louder. The deck rises higher. And somewhere inside your chest, acceptance begins replacing panic. Not peaceful acceptance, exhausted acceptance. breathing hard, looking at the stars, wanting more time. And maybe that's why the story still haunts people, because somewhere deep down, everyone is already on some version of the Titanic, moving confidently through darkness, believing the structure around them is permanent, ignoring the quiet vibrations beneath the floor, telling themselves there's still time, still time, still time. Until one night, something enormous and silent appears out of nowhere, and suddenly, you understand how precious ordinary life always was. The warm room, the uneventful morning, the people you assumed would still be there tomorrow, the small conversations you barely paid attention to, because catastrophe teaches human beings a brutal truth. Normal life was the miracle the entire time, not the miracle of brutal truth. Not success, not status, not ambition. Just the ability to wake up safely without realizing how rare that safety actually is. And maybe that's the final image the Titanic leaves inside the human mind. Not the ship breaking apart, not the icy water, not even the screams, but thousands of people standing beneath beautiful stars, realizing too late that they were never as permanent as they believed.